So you obviously look after kind of approximately 70 groups ranging in all shapes and sizes across the country. And what are you seeing within that portfolio when it comes to change of ownership, manufacturer, encouraged opportunities, refranchising? What's going on in that world, and what do you think is going to happen as we move into 2025?
Yeah, it sounds a bit of a cliche, but it's a dynamic marketplace. People are focused on doing the right thing for the business. So in summary, you've got brands that are keen to push their partners to grow. Sometimes that's to protect a market area, to gain some synergy of having a market area representation. You can reduce some costs, perhaps work a little bit smarter. To the other extreme, we've seen some of the dealer groups getting opportunities outside of their normal area of influence. I suppose that's the dynamic that I don't fully understand. A brand dictating to a dealer group to buy a site that's a 2-hour drive time away, it must have an impact on the day-to-day operation of that business. Moving away from perhaps some of the franchise-led initiatives or changes, certainly the used car performers, I feel you've seen a lot of used car businesses really critically analyse their stock profile. So whether that be sort of moving up and down in the market, more at a certain price point, or even specialising in EVs. Some people are very, very canny, very entrepreneurial. And when we talk about the outlook for the year, and certainly into 2025, you get the feel that some of that entrepreneurial spirit can come back into play. We've seen a 24 registration market with a lot of artificial, dare we say it, sales. And then we come into 25 and maybe there's a little bit more margin on the table for dealers to go at and to bring something to their customer base, which is a bit more unique. With that, you would hope that the ones that have got the ability to sort of put campaigns together will be in a good place to make some money as we get into Q1. But underpinning all of this, I don't think any of us want to go back to the pre-registration regime of perhaps the 2010, 2008 sort of era when dealer groups were suffering horrendous losses when they did go into that pre-registration cycle. But when you're speaking to somebody about some of the transactions and the mergers and the mergers and acquisitions that are going on in the marketplace, I expect you want to see a consistent profit return from the businesses rather than a peak and a trough.
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes without saying, if you've got a business that's demonstrated sustained profits over a period and consistently, whether that be the good times, the bad times, or the indifferent times, that's going to give anybody more confidence that will be sustainable moving forward. Unfortunately, the industry we are in is renowned for its peaks and troughs. So one year you can make an absolute fortune, the next year due to supply, OEM activity, whatever it might be, consumer demand, it could be a completely different kettle of fish. So yeah, I think when you look at the different brands out there, you've got some brands like a Volvo, for example, that you look at some of the performance within their network, and some of those businesses are just very steady, profitable performers. They don't break records, they don't make tens of millions one year and then none the next, but they are very, very sustainable, nice profit levels. That when you compare, I guess, use BMW as an example, where in 2022, 23, you had some really strong profitability coming through, perhaps also on the back of the fact that the Mercedes agency was in play and people were finding their feet with that, so there was probably a benefit there. Compared with 24, where there was an issue and there was some quarantine vehicles and there was some supply held back, that's a completely different market. Now, you could argue that's out of the dealer's control. It's not, but if I was in a buyer's shoes, I'd be looking at that and saying, well, what am I going to be able to make out of this business? What is my ROI on this investment? How much am I going to pay for this business? And how long is it going to be before I actually start to make money for myself rather than paying back what I've paid someone? So I think all those factors come into it. You've then got, as you know, OEMs who have some quite strong views on it. There's a number out there who aren't entertaining new partners into their network. There's some that we mentioned previously that are openly looking to dramatically reduce their number of partners. kind of tenfold in certain circumstances, which is just phenomenal. And then you've got some of the internationals who are looking still at the UK as an entry point, which just throws the whole thing up in the air. And if you've got a dealer group that represents 10 brands and someone wants to buy it, that owner is not going to be able to go and seek permission from every single OEM prior to doing that deal or agreeing that deal. So I think there has to be an element of pragmatism with this, because otherwise it's just not going to work, quite frankly. And certain brands will undoubtedly end up with no representation in areas, because one thing that I'm pretty certain of is the cost of setting a new dealership up in certainly a southern based location, if you can even find a plot of land, never mind then having to start from a zero database position because someone's terminated or what have you. The viability of that, I'd love someone to show me that you can make that work within a 5-year period, because I just don't see it. You've got properties that are over facilitized that you spend 10 million on that are worth 8 million, so you're already 2 million quid underwater before you've even opened the doors. You've got the losses to get it going. You've probably got the grieving previous dealer with a database, an after sales facility, and a used car pitch with all of those brand vehicles on. So it makes it challenging. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time over the next 12, 18, 24 months as some of the OEMs do try and manufacture change within the networks. You've then also got these whopping dealer groups out there, the super groups, if you want to call them, where you've had Group 1 that has grown at a remarkable rate. Lithia has come from nowhere and all of a sudden is one of the most kind of prevalent players in the market. Virtue continue to be a massive group out there as well. We've got Marshalls, who appear to be closing some businesses and restructuring a little bit under the Consolidation banner. Sytner have been quite quiet. Obviously, there's been a change of a chief exec there, so we're not sure what their strategy would be, but I would hazard a guess they'll continue to grow. Obviously, a change in the guard at Arnold Clark as well. So Russell's now taken over from Eddie. Again, there's a lot of moving parts with some serious players in the market. Do I think we're going to get to the supermarket scenario where we've got 5 key players? No, I just don't think that works because of the nature of the OEM and the franchise model. Do I think we're going to see more consolidation? Yes, absolutely. And hopefully, being honest, that's within the kind of the SME dealer group base, where you've got regional groups getting a little bit more scale around them, being able to take on smaller businesses that are looking for that kind of continuity, maybe keeping it within a regional ownership. And ultimately, those good businesses out there will continue to be profitable and be a success, in my view.
Yeah, you made a really good point before about some of the more premium brands. For them, their network security, their points of representation is absolutely essential to that customer experience. And I think as we've gone through the year, you've seen the transactions happen, and then almost a cascade of some of the excess sites being sold off. I know it's nearly impossible to facilitate what you think will happen in 2025, but do you think that will start to reduce in quantum, or do you think there's still plenty to go?
You would think it would reduce, but then maybe another big deal happens.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happens, the balls are all up in the air again. So I still think there's change coming, because there hasn't been a huge fallout from some of those mega groups as we see it today. Mm-hmm. We know from dozens of discussions we've had that there are many encouraged transactions out there with certain OEM partners at the moment that are not particularly moving. So I think either the plug's got to be taken out in some way, shape or form to enhance or encourage these things to start moving, or there's going to have to be a change in strategy, because ultimately some of these owner drivers aren't getting any younger. No, and they do want to find a home for their businesses. Some of the bigger boys have to continue to grow because they've got shareholder expectations, they've got returns that they need to make, and then you've got the kind of the middle ground, which is the well-run regional businesses that are looking for opportunity, looking to protect their businesses against the market dynamics, the changes in ICE vehicles to EV to new entrants. I think you mentioned earlier that there's never a dull day in the automotive space. So My personal view is I think there will be more consolidation as we move through this year. I think there will be encouraged transactions from OEMs because of certain partners having too great a market share in their network. And I think, as sad as it's to say, 2025 is going to see some distressed transactions. There are going to be businesses that are going to be picked up very, very cheaply because they're on the brink, they've run out of cash, they're heading towards running out of cash, and actually it'll either be OEM or third-party funder encouraged to move things on. So I think it's going to be a busy year. There's plenty on the books already. There's plenty of ongoing conversations. There'll be some good transactions and there'll be some painful ones undoubtedly, but that's never been different really.
Yeah, we haven't seen many distressed businesses for quite a few years now.
No, great to see.
It is great to see, especially with our client base. But it only seems like yesterday that we were coming off the back of COVID with all the bad things that happened, with the restriction in supply, with the unfortunate impact of furlough at the time. But it did promote a lot of cash to be retained within businesses, didn't it? And now we're coming into a regime where employment costs are increasing, interest costs are increasing, and I know it's long been a mantra of the industry, but focus on stock control, focus on working capital management, and ultimately protecting the cash that you can tends to see the business through that cycle.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that I've definitely seen, and some of the headlines have been unfortunately around cost reduction, is it's interesting who's moved when. Because there were some really negative headlines around some of the bigger groups looking at redundancy programs and cost-cutting measures very early doors. And okay, some of the dates of those announcements perhaps could have been chosen a little bit better because they were around kind of sensitive times of the year. That said, when you step back from it again, were they actually on the front foot with some of those things ahead of the curve because they could see the music was going to kind of change, and therefore they've got themselves in a better position. We know from the work we're doing within the clients that we're working with that, again, the NIC hits that are coming, the national minimum wage changes, all of those are direct hits to this year's bottom line. So have people reacted to those? Have people maximised to make sure that they are saving as much as they can? Are people utilising their funding facilities to the max? Are they trying to turn that stock, or are they sitting on some horrors from kind of last year still? I think you can't afford to be sat waiting. And I think the other thing that we are starting to see, as you well know, is that big upturn in HMRC activity in the sector, whether that's reviewing the furlough claims that people were making, whether that's looking at your NIC, PAYE, VAT. It's all coming at once, and dealers need to be on their front foot. They need to be aware. They need to be talking to their advisors. Sounds like a sales pitch, maybe it is, but actually, in all seriousness, people need to be on the front foot with these things, because the last thing you need in a downturning market is something coming from left field that you're not expecting that ultimately takes a big chunk of cash out of your bank.
Yeah, it's go and see the dentist for a checkup rather than have a fill-in later on. It's never a nice experience. But certainly now that we're out of this sort of boom and bust of EVs, we're hopeful that the working capital cycle returns to normal, that people are trading in a way which is it enhances the used car proposition. We also had the interruption in, was it October time last year, with the finance selling and the discretionary commissions. So again, you had this hiatus where people were perhaps taking the foot off the accelerator a little bit in terms of how they were trading. Coming into 25, at the time of us sitting down today, we haven't had the outcome of that review, but I suppose it's getting back to that business as normal. Focus on what the dealership does well, change the things that they can change, and if it is unfortunately around cost cutting, they're making that process as streamlined or as considerate as possible. But longer term, as you correctly said, Dave, it's about making sure they're ready for any of the challenges that might be coming at them from HMRC in one form or another.